Hey, family. Welcome to another episode of what I call Relevant Conversation with guess who? Me. I'm your host, Bishop John Selders, and I am pleased to have this opportunity, like we've had in times past, opportunities to say a thing, discuss a thing, talk over a thing, think about some things, and do it in real time sometimes, and to do it using the platforms, these airways, if you will. I guess I can't call it airways. That kind of dates me a little bit. But anyway, these airways, I'm going to call it these airways, this platform. And tonight, I get to do it once again with somebody I know pretty well, somebody I would consider family to me. He is a younger brother and hails from the windy city of Chicago. And some of y'all don't know, but I used to live in Chicago. Chicago is that town I described as just a little south of heaven. For me, it's a town that's like my hometown, St. Louis. When I moved to Chicago, I only moved to a different location. It was the same people, the same buildings, the same everything. Chicago is just a whole lot bigger than St. Louis these days. But and certainly when I was growing up, but it looks so much like it, and it is so familiar to me. So listen, I found a thing, and maybe he'll find this interesting. Back about 10, 12 years ago, my younger brother used to write for things. He would put things out. Huffington Post. Y'all remember the Huffington Post when that was a thing? He write articles and things. And so the Huffington Post described our guest tonight, my family member, as a sacred activist. And I think I like that. I think I like calling you a sacred activist. I would call you a kind of public observer, cultural critic, some would say. He's a minister, pastor, author, and my family and friend. Let me call to this platform the Reverend Patrick D. Shaffer. Come on in here and greet the people. Now that I have embarrassed you enough.
Right. It's okay. It's fine. Thank you.
I remember those articles, man. I remember the Huffington Post thing, and
absolutely,
and I guess that was in and around you dropping the book.
It was, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little while ago.
Mm-hmm. It was a bit ago, but I found this thing, and I said, I get a kick out of him. He might not get a kick out of it, but I'll get a kick out of you not thinking it's a kick, and so therefore it's a,
That's
I'm
funny.
I'm getting a couple of chuckles out of it.
It's
How you
okay.
doing, brother? How you doing? Listen.
Mm,
I wanted to talk to you tonight, really, because a couple of things have happened, um, and I'll talk. We've had um, the passing of a legend, for some of us, in the Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson Sr. And I also say, and just pause for a moment, the Reverend Dr. Bernard Lafayette also made transition recently, and I'll have to make mention of him, because I've known him, over the course of my life. But Bernard uh, Lafayette was a member of the crew during the Nashville sit-ins. He was a classmate of Congressman John Lewis. Went to the Baptist Seminary in Nashville, Tennessee, and was, a mentee and a student of the Reverend James Lawson and the Highlander Center. So he was involved in all of that. I know him more personally because for a number of years he moved to St. Louis,
okay.
and he helped in the late 1970s. And he reminded me of this. We were together um, uh, some time ago, and he reminded me, I used to live in St. Louis. I said, you did, and then I said, you did, and then I remembered that
Mhm,
he was involved in the late 1970s with the unions, and in particular the teachers union. And
mhm,
so he along with Mother Miss Battle and the teachers there, they did a number of strikes. One was a very long strike in the St. Louis public school system, most notably, and got them, a great deal of benefits and such. And in his latter years, he was doing lots of different work with um, community groups across the country, helping them think through what it means to live civically, and the struggle for justice in the ways that those groups were. He was with us, and a part of a group of us that were in Ferguson, and so since he knew St. Louis, he was down back and forth there. He was down out in Baltimore during the rebellion, Freddie Gray, during that period of time, and with just good people who's in and out of here, out of Hartford here,
mhm,
and very often when he would be here, we would spend a little time together. So I pay homage to him. He's now joined the great cloud of ancestors. But could we just spend just a few minutes and talk about Reverend Jackson
mhm,
from your
mhm,
perspective?
mhm. Yeah, first, thank you for having me back. I appreciate it. I'm always glad that when you and I can conversate. It's one of the joys of life, being able to have conversations with you. So
No,
thank
listen,
you.
conversate. That's some of that old ebonic. I don't know if that's a real word, but you and
Yeah,
I, black
you
people know what
understand
that
what we're
conversate.
saying. Listen, we know what we talk about.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Um, so thank you. Yeah, you know what? It's been a 2 or 3 weeks now, and I think we're all processing, and I think it's very difficult for young people to understand who he was, um, and who a young Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson was. You know, I've been mining, some YouTube, and I don't know, everybody talks about, I am somebody, and that chant, but there was another one at the Black Expo, like in 1976, 77. He said, "What time is it?" They said, "It's nation time." I like that one. It's nation. It's nation time. He comes out of the Black radical tradition.
What time
Um,
is it?
it's
Nation
nation.
time.
Nation
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, And there's a lot of things said about how do we situate him within the context of American history. One of the most significant figures. I reject this idea that he was too late to be king, too early to be Obama. I think there's a broader narrative to how we understand him. I think a more significant narrative, and this is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what I've been thinking about. He actually, to me, defined what it is to be a Democrat. And I make that claim based off this is that after the Great Society, right, and LBJ says, well, we've lost the South for, a generation or two. Since that moment, Democrats have been moving further and further to the middle, further right, to try to basically apologize to the South for what LBJ did and to try to make amends for it. And but it was Reverend Jackson, through his run for president, who actually defined for me what it is to be a Democrat. That he centered human rights through the lens of civil rights. He brought workers' rights. He brought, the idea of unions and wage growth, and spoke against the evils of capitalism and championed the ERA and talked about nuclear proliferation. Democrats were not talking like that before him, right? He was the first one who got up on a major political platform and started talking about, queer rights and gay rights. He did that. That by the time I became a Democrat, they had adopted his linguistics into what it meant actually to distinguish yourself as a liberal or a Democrat. They were not talking about that. They were not talking that way before him. Universal health care as a human right. I was not talking. They're talking about the party of Gary Hart or Dukakis or Carter. They weren't. These white men, Al Gore, they were not talking that way about politics and about what it meant to be a Democrat. He did that. And even though, quote unquote, he was not successful, technically he was not successful in reaching the presidency, there was no president after those runs who could ignore Reverend Jesse Jackson, whether you were Democrat, whether you were a Republican. You could not ignore him, because if you did not champion, or if you did not give deference, if you do not pay attention to what he thought was important, he was going to be Jesse Jackson all across the world, telling everybody how wrong you are and making you talk about issues that you don't want to talk about. And so to me, it is not just that the technical and the mechanisms of the voting and the delegate count in the Democratic Party, which is significant. We know that's significant. No, he actually defined what it meant to be a Democrat, that by the time Barack Obama started talking about health care, well, it was like, yeah, well, how come we haven't done this before? When we start talking about rights, like, well, yeah. And it was only normalized because 20, 30 years earlier, Reverend Jesse Louis Jackson defined for the party what it meant to be a Democrat. And so when I see Bernie Sanders, when I see Mamdani, when I see all of the progressives, it is so normal. Their language is so normal, and their ideas are so normal. I don't know about you, but I've listened to his 84 and 88 speech over and over again, and I'm like, well, what did he say that was wrong? Because he made plenty of sense. Like, I don't understand why was this so radical? Oh, it was radical because Democrats didn't talk like this. Democrats didn't center the needs of the people. And I would suggest that he made the Democratic Party a democracy. He democratized the Democratic Party that centered the needs of people and the rights of people. And I don't know if he'll be remembered as that, but that is definitely what he did, and I think we should talk more about
Well, I think so I would agree that he changed um, electoral politics, period, to
it.
what we now understand and what we now know. I want to pick up on something you said, because I want to say not only did he focus on the people, but he focused in on poor people. He focused in on margin folk. He focused in on those who live at the edges of our
Mhm.
communities, in lots of ways. He himself embodied it. I mean, the brilliance of his 1988 speech at the Democratic National Convention is him telling his own story of being the son of an unwed, teenage mom living
Yeah.
next door to his daddy. I mean, and saying, not only I am somebody, right? So we know that part, and I love Nation Time. You can't that convention of black leaders in
Yeah.
Gary, Indiana,
Yeah.
in 1972, where
Mhm.
where now remember for folks who don't have this history in mind, Dr. King was killed in 68,
Mhm.
right? Robert Kennedy was killed, assassinated in 68. And then there was a fragmenting, if you will, of sort of black leadership nationally, right? There was a kind of way in which folk went several different ways. However, because if you all remember, Kwame Ture, some would call him by his known name earlier, Stokely Carmichael, was talking Black Power. You had the Panthers who had begun to make waves. Fred Hampton in Chicago, for example,
Mhm.
and his assassination. So all of that was happening all up, coming in through there. What you had was the convention in Gary, Indiana, this gathering where Mrs. King and Mrs. Betty Shabazz come together, and they're on the platform when Jesse delivers this huge, big old speech, where I think much of what was pulled together as far as what I'm going to call a black social geopolitical agenda was formulated. I mean, there, Amos Wilson, and other thinkers were doing the kind of thinking work. Vincent Harding had asked by Mrs. King and the King Center to develop the Institute of Black Life out of Atlanta. So there was lots of things going on there. So I would say it was Jesse and Reverend Jackson in particular raising up, the life of poor people to a national. He focused there, and it was there then that folk could not just ignore this power base, because
Sure.
what he did that was different that we do now. This is
Mhm.
not how it was done. Jesse didn't go out and didn't convince the party to do something. He brought voters to the party.
And I think that that gets overlooked. Like they can't give us a tally on how many new registered voters that he brought into the party. What we do know is that he got what 7 million the first time, and then he increased that number to like 11 million by '88. And these were new voters that he
Hmm.
brought in. He went all across the country because again, right? I'm in Chicago, so I'm in the midst of and watching all of this. The idea is, well, if Harold could organize and win, you know, the mayorship in Chicago by bringing in new voters, to which Reverend Jackson was an intricate part of that, and B. Herbert Martin was a part of that, and a bunch of other black pastors were. Reverend Jackson says, "Well, if we could do this locally, then we can do this nationally,
National.
right?" And
Mm-hmm.
so he crisscrosses the country, registering new voters who become the base of the Democratic Party. Like I am, my first, presidential election was 93. Bill Clinton was my first president that I voted for. I am a Democrat because Jesse Jackson was. I voted for Clinton because Jesse Jackson wasn't on the ballot, right? Like I'm a Democrat. I'm Chicago Democrat, so my politics are embedded. That is what it is, and so and like me, my mother worked for Push for some time. My dad played the organ over there. So being around Push as a kid, what it was, I grew up and I became a part of the Democratic Party because Reverend Jackson was a part of the party. But like me and my generation, we had children. And they are Democrats because we're drawing a line between 84, 88 until subsequent presidential elections that served as the base of the Democratic Party. So I think his influence and his fingerprint can't be ignored. When you look at it through that lens, he has defined to us what it means to be a Democrat. He made the Democratic Party the party of the people. He changed the mechanisms about proportional electorate voting. That we understand how that affected subsequent elections. Like how didn't he? How didn't he change politics in America? And I ask you this, and you can tell me what you think. I'm not sure we get Reverend Jackson as we know him if he had won the presidency.
Well, I would agree. In fact, we can say, and I heard Jesse Jackson Jr. say this. He never held political office.
No.
So let's think about this. Just slow down just for a minute. Let's think about this. For the kind of way he impacted electoral politics. Now, one could say, and I probably have said it, that I don't know if it was the right thing to have focused so much on electoral politics. So there's an argument to be had there, and I would be in that conversation, right? Mm-hmm. But that notwithstanding, that if it was going to be that we were going to use electoral politics as at least one strand toward our liberation. And when I say our, I'm talking about black liberation. If that was going to be one strand, then he was leading and never held office anywhere. But his influence, his handprint, his fingerprint, his work helped shape and define all of the runs of all. So the very first black mayors, who did they call to come in and speak for them? During that era,
absolutely,
it was Jesse Jackson.
He was the tidal wave that brought Maynard Jackson in Atlanta and John Lewis to Congress, and what happened in Detroit. All of these black mayors, congressmen, and all of these people moved toward electoral politics because of the wave that he created, while simultaneously did not want him to run. He was a risk.
Now that's a story.
Right?
That was the story that folks didn't want it. Yeah.
They did not want him to run.
Here's another piece of this that I hadn't quite thought about it until just now. Well, I've thought about it, but putting it together. Reverend Jackson also, at the same time that he was pushing and leading in an electoral political manner, he never missed anybody's funeral. every black cultural event for my whole lifetime. He didn't miss. He was he you would see Jesse, Reverend Jackson, you would see him at he was at the big concert, the Watt Stacks big concert in the late 1960s,
It's
where Rance
crazy.
Allen opened where Black Moses comes out with the chains and breaks the chains. He was there. He was the speaker there. That big cultural events. Reverend Jackson was there doing what Reverend Jackson does. I was at the recording of Tremaine Hawkins's live record, where the
Mhm.
Potter's House,
Mhm.
where she recorded that. Who was in the audience? And because he was there, he wanted. She dedicated "Singing Change" to Reverend Jackson. And I'm naming, so these kind of cultural events
Yeah,
in our community. Reverend
yeah.
Jackson was there.
He was basically like Forrest Gump. Like he just comes into connection with all of these historical figures. I was watching one day Richard Pryor live on the Sunset Strip. It was his first time after he was burned. He had that burning incident. He's the first
Yeah.
time he gets up on stage. I see Reverend Jackson in the audience. Like, what? What? There are
That's what I'm
pictures,
talking about.
there are pictures of
Right.
him playing basketball with Marvin Gaye in the backyard. Like, what is who does this? This is absolutely insane. Everybody, the whole world knows who you are without ever being elected office, and that's just by sheer force of his ambition and his will and his clear moral vision.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I just don't think we can overstate it.
Yeah. We can't overstate it. And, quite honestly, we do ourselves, him, his legacy, and ourselves a disservice if we don't really locate him contextually in the time that he lived. So, and
Absolutely.
here's what I think people may be trying to get at, and I'm with you. I reject somehow he was too late and too soon. I reject that. What he is, however, is a connection and a conduit
Sure.
for within the context of these generations, right?
Yeah.
And that in the midst of it, and let me just say, it's my whole life. That his trajectory is my whole life. Understanding what it means to be um, of faith and have some kind of moral context, right?
Yeah.
But also to bear witness as the world needs those of us who have a faithful, vision of some sort, to also, make mention
Mhm.
of the plight of those who are at the margins, as I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
His sophisticated nature, and to boot, he wasn't a dumb man. He was smart as a whip. You ever
One of
be
the
around him?
most
His brain still was
brilliant.
functioning.
Oh,
Oh my God. I've been
man.
around him. He was just thinking off top of his head, just
Man.
off the cuff, going. He'd go.
A mind. Did you hear me? I mean, an active mind. And so let me go back to what you said, and I think you're absolutely right. Reverend Jackson is not a placeholder between Martin Luther King and Barack Obama. He is the connective tissue of a lived history. And I think that is, I like that idea because within it, he is able, through that tissue, to build the muscle, the muscle memory, the electoral muscle that he brings generations with him within the context. By the time Barack Obama coming up on the scene, especially specifically for presidential politics, it seems rational now. Like these ideas in the zeitgeist has had time to settle, and we have seen the ills of capitalism to which Reverend Jackson was decrying 20, 30 years ago. That now, oh yeah, we shouldn't be poor because we get sick. We should do something about that. No, I love situating him, but not as a placeholder. He is without him, we don't have what we have. We
That's
have
right.
no language and no linguistics for being a liberal, and we don't get a Barack Obama in electoral politics as we have known him in history without Reverend Jackson. And so, you know,
Yes, and I think we don't say it enough. We don't belabor it enough. And I think I've heard Mother Jackson, Jacqueline Jackson, um, be quoted as saying, something to the effect that history will probably be far more kinder to Reverend Jackson um, than we might be willing to say now. I think
sure.
it's still, as you just said, you're still trying to process. Chicago's certainly that, but this story of this young man from the Carolinas who was a football player.
Yeah,
He was a star quarterback.
yeah,
Comes out to Illinois and then comes back to an HBCU, and gets bitten with the bug in the 1960s, and is introduced to Dr. King and SCLC and the movement in Selma, right? And for what that then meant during the latter half of Dr. King's life, he was not very well liked at the end. I often say it. I've heard it said this by somebody or another, and I picked it up that if as many people marched in Selma as said that they marched over the Edmund Pettus Bridge, that the bridge would have fell down, right? So, right, everybody want to be there
I'm
now.
not. Hey, listen. I
It-
wasn't go right here. I'm with
yeah,
you.
but you know what I'm right.
I
Everybody,
wasn't there, so I go tell your story. I'm not mad at you. Go
yeah,
ahead.
I wasn't there either, but it's a whole lot of folk that wasn't there, and they need to tell the truth about it, right?
Yeah, well,
And so, right, Dr. King, it's very much like Dr. King. He then gets painted with this broad brush. He's quoted by folk who absolutely hated him, and like I know, everybody didn't receive Dr. King. Let me say it right here for the record: everybody didn't receive Jesse Jackson either.
oh
He,
no,
he he wasn't welcome in everybody's pulpit,
no,
because he represented a kind of revolutionary voice, right?
yeah, yeah,
In some ways, and I think that's certainly we have to pause. And I've not given him time because I wanted to have this conversation about Reverend Jackson with you, because I know personally what he has meant to you, and that for some of us he was the a North Star, right?
absolutely, yeah,
Some of the things I didn't want to be because I saw him being it, right? So but in many ways he was the way that I felt like we needed to go. And so God bless the Jackson family as they now, I heard one of the sons say, gotta now think of him as not is but was. And that moved me, because if you've been touched by the loss of a parent, I have, um, that was meaningful, that was moving, and that I think the send off was in many ways appropriate to a senior statesman, somebody who navigated not just here in the United States but globally. His witness meant that he got on a plane, went over yonder, and went and got some captured Americans and brought them back home. Who does that? And they're not a political leader. They're not elected to office,
yeah,
or not some billionaire that came from billionaire money and family. The way in which his story um, tells all of us, you know, to keep hope alive, to use his phrase, right?
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
so
yeah. I think that it was a fitting memorial for him. It was as long as it needed it to be. It needed to be. It could have been longer.
yeah,
Um, I and I understand the complicated space that memorializing such a luminary figure can be. It's a daunting task. How do you put in summation, his life? We'll be talking about this for a few decades to come, trying to contextualize him and to understand him. But I thought the memorial for knowing who he was and knowing Chicago as I do, this is the place that could only eulogize him. Um, and I am so comforted that he passed away in Black History Month. I mean, that's just perfect to me. Like, he rests within the month that we remember our ancestors, and now he is one of them. Uh, and so I think it was either going to be in February or it was going to be Juneteenth. So I'm glad it was. It would have been hard trying to get that bullseye to Juneteenth, but in February it was good. Yeah, it was good, and yeah. God bless him.
so since you mentioned uh, you mentioned the funeral, I, I gotta get into some of the culture right here, and
Mm-hmm.
some of um, if you will, and I just want your opinion about it. Let me mention this while it just came to me. And he rests. His final resting place is in Oakwood Cemetery.
Mm-hmm.
All right, in South Side of Chicago, very near the National Push headquarters. Um, Mayor Harold Washington rests there.
Yeah.
Bishop Lewis H.
David
Ford
Ford. Yeah.
rests there. The Johnsons are right next door
Mm-hmm.
to Bishop Ford's final resting place. And I'm talking about John Johnson. I'm talking
Yeah.
about, I'm talking about the Johnsons
Yeah.
of, Ebony
Yeah.
and 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 Emmett Till
Look, yeah,
rests there.
his resting place is amongst Jesse Owens and
Jesse Owens.
Clarence H. Cobbs,
Call the roll, sir.
Eugene D. Gray,
Eugene
uh,
Gray. All
Father
right.
Hayes.
Father Hayes is in
Yeah,
Oakwood Cemetery.
it is the place where he needs to be.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's it's right there. Yeah.
yeah. So the reason I lifted up, and it's a personal thing for me. I spend some time often in cemeteries. I am a public theologian and
Mm-hmm.
scholar and historian, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's lots of history that can come to life when you go and visit with the ancestors in places in cemeteries where you find a name and a date, you know, a birth date and a transition date, and what then those families. We have one of those kinds of cemeteries here in Hartford, where muckety mucks are buried. I live very near cemetery that Catherine Hepburn is buried.
Mm-hmm.
But who is also buried there is Samuel Colt from the Colt gun manufacturers, the Colt 45
Mm-hmm.
from here. And um, um, the Morgans. Now, y'all don't know nothing about no money, but J. Pierpont Morgan, who was
Mm-hmm.
the um, oligarch of a century or more ago, J.P. Morgan, you call him that, who,
Created the American economy.
as we know it
Yeah.
and understand it today. So those kind of resting places, cemeteries are of great value, at least to me, as I walk through them. Now, as he pivot, but we're gonna stay there for just a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
There were lots of people that had lots of words in eulogizing Reverend Jackson, and of course, in these moments, there's always some scuttlebutt that come
Mm-hmm.
up, and one of the things I found very interesting is um, President Obama, along with President Biden and President Clinton, Vice President Harris, Secretary Clinton were amongst some of the luminaries. I mean, every every just about denominational leader, at least in the black church world, black religious world, was there. Um, Certainly, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan gave his eulogy publicly at Savior's Day,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a lot of folks. They was they got hot there for a minute because my elder brother was there, and senior statesman,
Mm-hmm.
the Reverend um, Dr. Jeremiah A. Wright Jr. Barbara Jeremiah was there,
Mm-hmm.
and when Pastor um, um, Wright is in the room, you and I, growing up in the black religious tradition, you pay homage to the people where you come from. Your lineage is important,
Yeah,
and there was a little scuttlebutt on the socials,
a little.
a little scuttlebutt about the way in which Pastor Wright oh, might have been disrespected
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
by the former president of the United States, who one of his former members.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Could you talk a little bit? What was that about in Chicago? And I mean, I got a sense of it out here, you know, not living in Chicago, but you know, just so that we're
Yeah.
balanced. Amen.
Yeah. Well, you and I, we have colleagues, right? Um, who are pastors, seminarians, and Chicago is its own ecosystem. Um, and so the offense came because people pointed out that um, the former president, Barack Obama, in his eulogy, acknowledged a lot of people and did not acknowledge Reverend Wright. Um, I think that was misguided, and it was this kind of misappropriated outrage. But let's do this for you and I. We know who Reverend Wright is and what he means as an icon. For liberation theology and his fights for justice that predate cameras and newsreels. He was doing work at Trinity United Church of Christ. He was the first person that added to my lexicon the word apartheid, because you would drive past 95th and there would be this little placard right on the front lawn talking about free South Africa and down with apartheid. And it was like, well, what's apartheid? What is happening in South Africa? And so he is significant to Chicago, and he is significant to Black theologians and Black liberation, specifically liberation theologians. I also want to point out, as a point of history, that when Reverend Jackson went to go get that Black soldier that the Reagan administration was ignoring and left him in Syria, the few people who were on the plane with Reverend Jackson was the one Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan was on that plane with him, and Reverend Dr. Jeremiah A. Wright Jr.
How about that part?
They went to Syria with him. These were his brothers, right? They were with him, um, and had decades long friendship. So it was right for Reverend Wright to be there and to be on the front row. Um, And I'll say this: I am not a Barack Obama apologist. He doesn't need me for that. I think there are fair critiques to be made. Um, there are fair critiques to be made, but I was so satisfied. Number one, that he came because I didn't think he was going to come. Um, and number two, I thought he gave an outstanding eulogy to situate Reverend Jackson within the context of human history, American history, and American politics. I thought he did an excellent job. I am confused about what more do you want from him? Because if he hadn't come,
had to been something else.
My good, the fits that would have been thrown. It would have been, and I would have been throwing a fit right with you. So I'm with you. But he came. He stood there, and understanding that they were never close, and perhaps they could not have been close. I think they understood each other. I think they understood each other's ambition, like few people could understand between two men. I think to have Barack Obama come and to situate him within that and to affirm the worth of his work within American politics, to me, I was incredibly satisfied with that. The issue was, well, he got up and acknowledged Reverend Meeks, he acknowledged Father Flake, he acknowledged this person, that person. And Reverend Wright was sitting on the front row, and he did not acknowledge Reverend Wright. So two things, and then I'm going to stop talking. Two things. Number one is, for all the Black preachers who were there, who got on the microphone, who saw Reverend Wright in their eye line, just like Barack Obama got up and saw Reverend Wright in their eye line. My question is, if it was so important for Reverend Wright to be acknowledged, then why didn't you do it? They had ample opportunity from every Black pastor, preacher that got up, politician that got up. They got up and ignored him, just like they're saying Barack Obama ignored him. So if it was that important, if he is as hallowed and respected, and he is, and he should be given, and just put a pin right there, he was right. Reverend Wright was right. Has been proven right.
Over and over again.
Over and over again. I am an apologist for Reverend Dr. Jeremiah A. Wright. I will defend him and down the hill defend him. He was right. But knowing that, and if I know that, they know that, and if it was as important as they say it was, then when they got the microphone, and Barack Obama was sitting over on the first row over on the left, Jeremiah was on the right, how come they didn't acknowledge him?
Not one.
Not one. Not
one.
So I'm going to hold them accountable as much as they're holding Barack Obama accountable, because this is your guy. I mean, this is the father, one of the fathers of liberation theology. Like y'all in seminary talking about his work. He comes up and he deserves all the things. But if it was that important, then why didn't the Black clergy mention him? They didn't. Number two is, I'm interested in how come they can't understand that between Barack Obama and Jeremiah Wright is a very complicated relationship. And all of us have had pastors in our life that have been problematic.
Complicated
men who had their own ambition and their own worldview and have cemented themselves into who they are and are not moving off that hill. Right. And not making any adjustments. And when two ambitions collide with one another, there is no give. And I don't understand how come they can't understand that what Barack Obama, the best thing he could do is to not say anything.
Because right? That would have been a thing too. That'd have been a thing too.
If he would have acknowledged him, it would have been a thing. Then what do you say? And then do you say too much? Or do you not say enough? Like, there was no win for Barack Obama in that moment. The best thing I think he could have done is to offer his silence when it comes to that. Because Barack Obama has his own lived reality about his complicated former pastor that could have upended American history as we knew it. That could have went a whole nother way. And then we have to look at what is the effects of that. And so for him to distance himself, which was a political necessity at the moment, and from what I understood, they have talked. But that ain't nobody business. That's not my business. It's not anybody business. And this performative idea of he's got to come and pay obeisance, or I think that's too much. First of all, it's not Reverend Wright's service, and it would have thrown all of the attention to this one relationship that has been in the public for so long. It would have detracted from what we came to do. And so, my idea is, again, if it was that important, y'all should have got up and gave deference to Reverend Wright, as which we all should do when he is in the room. We all should do that, but they didn't do that. So why would you expect Barack Obama to do that? Is irrational to me. Like I don't understand it.
I appreciate your honesty and your honest critique of that moment. While I may have something personal, of a similar sort, if it was important, how come some others didn't talk? I've also been to those marathon services. That was just one moment. There are about 15 other moments we could talk on. About 15 other, right? So, and one of the things, I'm going to put you on first. One of the things you said that just cracked me up is, if you've ever been to a Push convention, then his funeral mirrored the Push conventions.
That one-day Push convention. That's what it was. And you have to be a part of that to understand what that is and the nuances and all that. But I was like, yeah, this is
that made me giggle because I've been to a Push convention, so I know what you were talking about. So there is for those who don't know, this is we talking inside now.
Yeah.
There's a kind of chaos that exists. Organized chaos, but chaos indeed. Yeah. And let me just say, just for the record, you're a church young man. You grew up in the church, and so I'm giving and in the gospel music church, right? Your father was a luminary in that area. If you've been to a GMWA, Reverend Cleveland decides he's gonna take the mic. Well, the course of the program of the nightly musical will change.
Yeah.
Right? So it just is going to change. They tell me, and I was around Preacher Cobbs a bit, but when he wanted to channel and come to the sacred, there was nobody greater, right? And so I think
and that's not a negative critique.
No,
right?
Right.
Because I've read biographies about the Clinton administration, and they basically ran it the same way. Like it is spontaneous creativity towards a productive end that things get done, but they get done within this kind of. I looked at. I was watching the funeral, and I was watching all this movement and all these people. I was like, yeah, this is.
What they can Push convention. This is how it happens.
Yeah, this is how it gets done.
Yeah. So in it's in a kind of very real way that I think we have to I honor who we are, right? And I am one of those who understands our community, and it is not one, monolithic. Two, it is not simple.
Yeah.
and 3, it is creative and procreative, right?
Yeah.
And in that, the real genius is that it happens in the context of that what I call that procreation, right?
Mm-hmm.
That happens in the spontaneous, in the flow of spirit, that seems contradictory to the program, the established program.
Mm-hmm.
So I appreciate you allowing me to take us down that road a bit.
Can I add
yes,
something? One more thing,
sure.
because it's stuck in my craw. This kind of internal policing that we do is
Yeah,
exhausting to me,
yeah,
because the black clergy has this reflex of always managing their authority where they feel like they have authority, or when they feel like they are confronting something they have the authority to dominate. So we'll police Barack Obama and his words because we see him as part of our community. But when it comes to Trump, when it comes to Christian nationalism, when it comes to police brutality, when it comes to Gaza, when it comes to Iran, when it comes to confronting real power and being a prophet, as you know, we understand what a prophet is according to the Bible, can't find them. But y'all wanna police, people who are part of the D9. Y'all want to police people what they do in their bedrooms. They want to police this, that. Y'all want to police. We police each other, but we never use that authority and turn it towards the object that is systematically deconstructing our very history and who we are. Can't find you. So y'all want to jump up and down on Barack Obama because he didn't acknowledge Reverend Wright. But when it comes to more consequential issues, that you have your bully pulpits every Sunday, you always gotta. I don't understand why these people need so much attention to do nothing with it.
Yeah, bro. Yeah,
I'm struggling.
yeah.
I'm struggling with this reflex to raise your visibility just to be seen, not to turn it towards what is constructive and what is actually hurting our communities. I ain't heard nobody talk about the healthcare premiums that have went up astronomically.
Yes, sir.
Nobody talk about SNAP benefits that they have kicked 3 million people off SNAP benefits. How your members gonna eat? You don't confront real power. You don't confront the Department of Education that is rolling back funding.
Gone. It's gone.
What are you like? What are you doing? So you're popular. You church popular for what?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I for the life of me, I cannot understand the idea of people who want to be so important and so visible and achieve that to do less with it. It's me. I may be the only one who feels this way, but I'm just exhausted. Like I'm so over it. Over it. Black people getting tough with black people, but never getting tough with the ones who are actually hurting our community.
Yeah, let's be clear. If it's wrong for one, it's wrong for all. If it's wrong over there, it's wrong over here. The issue really is, where is your consistency? Oh, never mind. Because anytime you're gonna speak out and it might risk your bag, I got you. Right. So that one of the things you can name pretty quickly is where is the line where you bear witness, regardless to what the consequence may be, that you bear witness to the truth as you know it. Yep, y'all can talk all you want to about the critique, for example, of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, right? And I used to, he caught some of this smoke, a little while back. And what I would say all the time, so where is your prison ministry? Because every boo-boo, pookie, and ray-ray, I know lives get changed They go in the joint one way, they come out the joint another way, and all of a sudden they're building community on the corner, bean pies and the final call. But let me be
disciples,
clear.
right?
Let me where your witness at? And so here we are, bro. Here we are in this moment that I think it bears repeating that you know, the Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson, we all follow in some of those footprints as a Black Christian minister, never serving office, but having influence from one end of the community to the next. It's Reverend Jackson that went down. Plenty of Black folk, and I want to say Black women, got jobs in the Fortune 500 companies because of his Wall Street work. Operation Breadbasket, that he was sent by Dr. King to come to Chicago to run, for example. I mean, that is what became Operation Push and Rainbow Push, right?
I got to be on a Zoom call in January about the Black journalists who covered the 84 and 88 campaign, and to hear their stories were basically like, we were working at Time Magazine, Newsweek. They wouldn't let us cover anything, but all of a sudden, Jesse Jackson starts running for president, and they said, go ahead and just go cover him. And out of that, they built careers that became what we know as Black journalism in the 1990s and 2000s, right? They got jobs. Like he put people in jobs and in places just because of the universe that he created for Black empowerment.
Yeah.
And so, you know, his influence and what he did and his contribution, like, it's singular. Yeah. It's singular.
It is. Listen, we had an hour already, and I didn't get to some of the more juicier parts of this conversation that I wanted to talk to you about. We ain't talked at all about Jamal Harrison Bryant. We ain't talked at all about some of the other things. So I'm gonna have to ask you to, you know, if you're willing to come on back around here. Now, let me be clear. We are in this season, for those of us of the Christian tradition, in the season of Lent. This journey from Ash Wednesday to Good Friday, Holy Saturday, into Resurrection Sunday. The Muslims are in their special month. I love it every so often. We get to practice our spiritual traditions together, right? So they're in their holy fasting month of Ramadan. So Ramadan Mubarak for our Muslim brothers and sisters, siblings of faith. And you can't have Easter without Passover for our Jewish siblings of faith. It was what we call the Last Supper, of the Lord's Supper, was actually the Jewish ritual and practice of the Seder meal, right? So here we are in this special time, this time of reflecting about our faith, reflecting about our space in the world, the space we occupy, and how, in fact, you know, our faith should then turn in some way as at least one purposed reality to make sure our, not just me and my family, but the whole community benefits, right? Our faith ought to be somehow to bear witness, and that witness then should allow us to be better, right? So I that's not gotten past me, and so in these moments, I'm appreciative of a conversation about some of our folk who in fact embodied that presence in our lives in real time.
Sure.
Reverend Jackson, rest in peace and power, and we'll see you on the other side. I got one last little anecdotal story. He didn't know me from a can of paint. He kind of did, because he always looked at me, you know. I don't think he ever met a stranger, right? So I never was around him. He never met a stranger. I was moved to tears to hear Isaiah Thomas's eulogy.
Mhm.
Him jumping out of the car and getting on his knee, getting at his eye, and to meet a young man, and to follow his entire career and life. I was moved. I could see that, Reverend Jackson. I could see that, because of how he always met me and greeted me as I was a distant, not a regular, but a good friend. And I appreciate my times having spent in his presence and in his company. And so I appreciate you, brother, for joining me to have this kind
Of
of,
course.
what I would consider a relevant conversation about Reverend Jackson, and promise me you'll come. You ain't got to promise, because I'm gonna call you anyway and just say, can you come on?
Anytime. Anytime.
And give mom my regards,
Oh
and
well.
your brothers my regards, and
Yeah.
family. I'm gonna be back at this again. Listen, we on our journey. We're on this journey together, and we will. I hear Dr. King. Now we will get to the promised land. Listen, I don't despair, although I get upset and depressed sometimes. I don't ultimately despair. I have hope, because my hope is not in, horses. It's some trust in chariots, some trust in horses. But scripture says we will remember the name of the Lord. Psalms 121 says, they that trust in the Lord shall be as Mount Zion. They cannot be removed, but abides forever. That's my trust, ain't in the horses or chariots. My trust is in God. And I recommend God to you, the great spirit, however you your language
Mhm.
pulls you into the conversation, that there's something that works within us and without us, and that we're connected through that spirit of something that's in and out of us, to be bigger and larger than ourselves. Man, thank you for being with us. Thank you, Brother Patrick, for sharing this time. And we'll
Anytime.
see y'all next time. All right.
All right.
Peace.